The days following the stranger's disappearance were restless ones for the village. People who drank from Nkem's jars awoke with trembling limbs, their eyes glassy, their cravings gnawing deeper with every sunrise. Some swore they heard faint whispers in their dreams, voices calling from the red depths of the clay pots, laughter that was not their own. Mothers tried to keep their children away from the market, but the scent of the wine seemed to travel on the wind itself, calling out like a hunter's horn. A shadow was growing, and though no one could name it, they all felt it pressing on their chest. Nkem, draped in a scarlet wrapper and adorned with ivory bracelets, was more radiant than ever. She moved like someone untouchable, her voice honeyed, her laugh deliberate, her every step drawing eyes. The jars she set out in the market seemed to pose faintly beneath the sun, their glow visible only when one dared look too long. She smiled at customers with a warmth so convincing that many forgot their unease, exchanging coins eagerly for the intoxicating liquid. To them, she was not merely selling wine, she was offering them relief, escape, something almost divine. But deep in the forest, far from the laughter of the market, the stranger had not disappeared. He knelt before the shrine of Oni, his jar glowing faintly against the carved idol of the earth goddess. The priest, an old man with ash-white hair and piercing eyes, had placed his hand upon the jar, recoiling when he felt the faint pulse within. "This is not wine," he whispered, his voice low, "this is blood dressed as sweetness. And it carries the curse of betrayal." The stranger lowered his head, knowing the truth must return to the people, even if it brought fire and chaos. The day of the annual harvest festival arrived, the biggest gathering of the year. Drums thundered in the square, dancers painted in bright colors twirled to the rhythm, and traders filled the streets with their goods. But no stall was more decorated than Nkem's. She had spread out fine cloths, polished her jars until they gleamed, and stood at the center like a goddess among mortals. Her laughter carried above the music, her smile wide and inviting. Even the chief himself sat proudly nearby, unaware of the storm brewing, watching his daughter bask in the admiration of the village. The stranger returned that morning, carrying the jar he had taken to the shrine. But this time, he did not walk alone. The priest of Ani followed, flanked by 2 young acolytes carrying staffs of sacred wood. They entered the square quietly, but their presence drew eyes almost instantly. Murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire. The drumming slowed, dancers hesitated, and soon the festival's rhythm bent toward them. The stranger's face was grim, his hands clutching the jar tightly, as if it might leap from his arms. Nkem's eyes narrowed when she saw them, though her smile never faltered. She straightened her posture and raised her chin, pretending not to notice the jar cradled in the stranger's arms. Instead, she raised her calabash high and called out to the crowd, "Drink, my people. Today we celebrate the bounty of the gods." Her voice rang clear, desperate to drown out the silence forming around the priest's slow approach. But her words landed strangely this time, too loud, too forced, and the villagers shifted uneasily, their tears suddenly tangled with doubt. The priest stopped at the center of the square, his staff striking the earth with a resounding crack that silenced even the drums. He pointed to the jar in the stranger's hands and then to Nkem's stall. "This is not palm wine," his voice boomed. "This is blood. Blood stolen and disguised, sold as joy but carrying only death." The words fell like thunder, and for a moment the crowd was frozen. Then came gasps, shouts, the clamor of disbelief. All eyes turned to Nkem, who stood still, her smile frozen in place. Nkem did not crumble. Instead, she laughed, the clear, ringing sound that carried across the square. "Lies," she cried, her voice dripping with mockery. "Do you not see how jealousy works? Do you not see how they wish to ruin me, your daughter, your sister, your friend? Look at me, would I harm you?" Her beauty, her charm, her practiced grace, she wielded them now like weapons, letting her words cut through the rising doubt. Many in the crowd hesitated, torn between fear and the pull of her voice. The stranger stepped forward, lifting the jar for all to see. The faint throb within it pulsed louder now, audible to those closest. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they realized the jar was not just glowing, it was alive. "If she speaks truth," the stranger said, his voice steady, "then let her drink from her own jar." The challenge hung heavy in the air. Nkem's smile faltered for the first time, her eyes flashing with rage before quickly softening again. Nkem raised her voice once more, this time softer, almost pleading. "My people, do not let them deceive you. I am the daughter of your chief. I am your blood, your pride. Would I poison my own?" She extended her hands toward the villagers as though offering her very heart. But her words no longer rang as sweet as before. There was a sharpness, a desperation beneath them, and the villagers, once spellbound, began to hear the cracks in her song. The priest raised his staff again, his voice cutting through Nkem's pleading tones. "Daughter of a chief or not, Ani sees all. You cannot hide blood with beads and smiles." He gestured to the stranger, who moved to set the cursed jar down in the open. As it touched the earth, the ground itself seemed to shiver, the glow spilling across the dust in tendrils of red light. Children screamed and clutched their mothers, warriors reached for their spears, and suddenly the festival square no longer felt like a place of celebration but of judgment. For the first time, cracks showed in Nkem's armor. She stepped back from her own stall, her smile gone, her eyes darting wildly. Yet even cornered, her tongue was sharp. "Do you not see their trick? They bring magic from the forest to deceive you. Look at me, I gave you joy, I gave you life. Who among you did not dance after drinking from my jars? Who among you did not come begging for more?" Her words struck like arrows, and though many villagers trembled, guilt mixed with their fear. Her charm had enslaved them, and they hated themselves for it. Then, without warning, one of the jars at her stall cracked. A fine red line split its surface, and from within, a sound escaped, a low, wet heartbeat that made the air vibrate. Another jar cracked, then another, until the stall itself shook as though alive. The crowd erupted into chaos, people screaming, stumbling, pushing against one another to flee. The drums toppled, dancers scattered, and the harvest festival turned to bedlam in a heartbeat. Still, Nkem screamed above it all, "Lies. Lies. You are mine, you will always be mine." The stranger moved quickly, seizing one of the glowing shards from the cracked jar and holding it high. The priest began chanting, the acolytes joining in, their voices weaving into a rhythm that clashed against the panicked cries. The shard pulsed like a living heart, and every time it beat, Nkem staggered as if struck. She clutched her chest, gasping, fury mixing with fear. "Stop this," she shrieked. "You think you can shame me? I am above you all." But her voice was breaking, her strength unraveling with each beat of the cursed shard. The villagers, once her loyal customers, began to shout not in her defense, but against her. "Deceiver! Witch! You cursed us!" The words grew louder, rising into a chorus of anger. Men who once bowed before her now picked up stones. Women who once envied her beauty now spat at her feet. The spell of her charm had broken, and in its place came the raw fury of betrayal. For the first time in her life, Nkem was not adored, not feared, but hated. She tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to run. The circle of villagers tightened around her, spears gleaming, stones in hand. She raised her arms like a queen holding court, trying one last time to command them. "You are fools. You need me. Without me, you are nothing." Her voice cracked, the desperation now laid bare, and the people only jeered. They pressed closer, the heat of their fury surrounding her like a fire. The heartbeat of the jars grew frantic, echoing her own racing pulse. Then came the moment of humiliation. A boy, barely 12, threw the first stone. It struck Nkem's shoulder, and she screamed, more in outrage than pain. Another followed, and then another, until a hail of stones pelted her, driving her to her knees. Her beads snapped, scattering across the ground, trampled by the very people who once admired them. Her scarlet wrapper tore, her ivory bracelets cracked, and the proud image of the chief's daughter crumbled before their eyes. The chief himself rose from his chair, his face ashen. He looked upon his daughter not with pity, but with horror. "What have you done, Nkem?" he whispered, though the words were drowned by the roar of the crowd. For the first time, the chief seemed small, powerless against the tide of his people's rage. His pride had blinded him, and now that blindness burned before the gods and men alike. The priest raised his staff once more, his voice booming. "Enough!" The stones ceased, the villagers panting, their chests heaving with rage and exhaustion. Nkem lay sprawled in the dust, her finery in tatters, blood on her lips, her eyes burning with hatred. The priest pointed to the broken jars. "She fed you death and called it joy. She sold your souls for her vanity. And now she stands stripped before you, no longer your goddess, but your shame." His words rang like a verdict, sealing her fate. As the chanting resumed, the stranger stepped forward and poured the contents of the cursed jar onto the ground. The liquid hissed as it touched the earth, turning into smoke that rose like a phantom. A terrible wail echoed through the square, and then silence fell. The glow from the broken jars faded, leaving behind only ordinary clay. Whatever power had enslaved the village was gone, burned away by the earth goddess's judgment. Nkem tried to rise, but her legs failed her. She reached out toward the crowd, her voice hoarse. "Help me. I am your chief's daughter," but no one moved. The same men who once fought for her favor now turned their backs. The same women who once envied her beauty now spit in the dust at her name. Even the chief himself lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. In that moment, she understood, she was utterly alone. The priest's voice carried over the silence. "Let her live, for death is mercy. Let her carry her shame, so all may remember the cost of vanity and deceit." The villagers nodded, their anger cooling into cold contempt. No one offered her hand, no one offered her comfort. Justice had been served, not by execution, but by humiliation. She would remain among them, a fallen queen in rags, a warning to every child who looked upon her face. The festival never returned to its rhythm. The drums were silent, the dancers gone. People dispersed slowly, whispering among themselves, casting glances at Nkem as she lay in the dirt. The stranger picked up the lifeless shard of clay and handed it back to the priest. Neither man looked at her again. Their task was done, the truth had been revealed, the curse broken, and the people freed. Night fell heavy over the village. Nkem remained alone in the square, her beads shattered, her wrapper torn, her pride in ruins. Owls called from the trees, dogs barked in the distance, but no one came for her. Her once flawless skin was bruised, her once admired hair tangled with dust. She had been stripped of everything, yet her eyes still burned with hatred, as though plotting revenge even in defeat. The gods had not killed her, but they had done worse, they had left her to live with the weight of her disgrace. The chief's daughter, once worshipped, was now a living scar upon the village, a reminder carved into flesh and memory. No song would sing her name again, no dancer would honor her beauty. She had been bought and sold by her own ambition, and justice, brutal and unrelenting, had claimed her in the end.